Hello, students. I know some of you are struggling a little bit with this conflict worksheet. So I wanted to kind of help you through it a little bit. I created some sentence starters, and I'm going to send you this file as well as a link to this video so that you can work through this together. But what I did was I created some little questions and sentence starters to help you think through the different types of conflict, because I've had already a few messages from some of you who are struggling applying what I showed you, excuse me, with Piper, applying that then to Cole and touching Spirit Bear. So the first conflict we have is person versus person. And the conflict we're looking at is how the main character is fighting or struggling with some other person. Now, Cole actually has some conflicts with a few different characters. So what you want to do is pick one, choose one character. So I have who is the main character fighting or struggling with, and how do you know? And I have some sentence starters to help you through that. The main character, or Cole, is struggling with, pick that person. Who is it that Cole is struggling with? Tell me why. Why is there a struggle? Or how do you know that there is a struggle between the two of them? Okay. Then you're going to look for a resolution to that conflict. How is that conflict being resolved? Now, depending on which character you choose, it may be a resolution that is happening right now while you're reading. It may be something that already was resolved, or it may be something that we can kind of predict about how it might be resolved. So you're going to then answer the question, how is that conflict resolved, and how do you know? The struggle between Cole and this other person you've chosen improves when, or if you're making a prediction, you can say will improve when. So when this whatever happens, okay? And then you're going to tell me, why does that actually resolve the conflict? The next one is person versus nature. So I have, what force of nature or natural situation does the character struggle with? How do you know? So for that force of nature, think of things like natural disasters. Think of things like weather. Think of things in the natural environment that Cole is struggling against. So for instance, in Touching Spirit Bear, when he is on the island, there are definitely some forces in nature that he is faced with and that he struggles against. So you're going to pick one of those things. Tell me what he's struggling against, if it's weather or if it's just be specific. Okay. And then tell me, it says Cole is struggling against this force when you tell me what is actually happening and how do you know? So that because is where you say, how do you know that this is a conflict, right? How do you know that this is a problem for him? So then we're going to look at our resolution. How is this conflict with nature resolved? How do you know? This conflict with, you pick that force of nature again, is resolved when, and tell me, how do you know that things have, or at what point do things resolve? And then how do you know that that actually solves the problem? Okay. And this is really what I did with Piper, but I know sometimes it's hard to take something like that and then apply it to another story. So that's why I thought the sentence starters might help you and kind of get framing your thoughts a little better with those questions. So the next one, we have person versus society. In what way is the character struggling to relate to others in society or those around him? So think of the larger, for Cole, think of larger groups of people, not just him and one other person, but think of how Cole relates to larger groups of people and what kind of struggle he has. So that's what you want to look for there. And you're going to answer it much the same as your other, those other questions. So I have a sentence starter for you to use there to help you along. Then resolution, it's a similar question again. How is this conflict resolved? How do you know? Cole's conflict with society resolves when? So what happens? Where the conflict is actually done. And then how do you know that actually solves the problem? So again, this might be one that there isn't exactly a resolution yet, but maybe you can make a prediction about how it might resolve. Okay. And tell me, how would that fix the problem? And then finally, we have person versus self. So this is about Cole's emotions. How is the character struggling with his own emotions? And then, and you'll tell me why. So I forgot to add in there, how do you know? Okay, Cole is struggling with his own emotions when and tell me something he does or that he shows where there's a conflict within himself, where he's struggling with something. And then tell me, how do you know that that is a person versus self conflict? How do you know that he is struggling? Then you'll answer that. So you'll then look at the resolution. How is that conflict resolving? So, how is the conflict within the character himself resolved? How do you know? Cole's struggle within himself is resolved when? Tell me what he does or what he says or what happens that shows that he's kind of figured it out a little bit, that he shows that he understands better or that he has learned something from himself. And how does that resolve this particular conflict? So, one thing to keep in mind is that there's not just one answer for any of these. So there could be a variety of ways you can answer this. The other thing to note is that, well, I guess that's the only thing I'm trying to point out to you, is that there's more than one way to answer this. Okay. You want to try to find text evidence to support what you have to say here. So, if you're making a prediction about how a particular conflict might be resolved in the future, let's say, like if you're looking at person versus society, and you're thinking about how it could be resolved in the future, be sure that your prediction kind of lines up with what has happened in the story at this point. It shouldn't come out of, just shouldn't be an answer out of thin air. It should still make sense based on the text evidence that you have before you. Oh, and the other thing I wanted to say, I know that we're sending this to you during chapters 14 and 15, but these conflicts do not have to come from chapters 14 and 15. They can come from any part of the story. In fact, it's going to make more sense if you think about from the beginning of the book until chapters 14 and 15, because some of the conflicts that were brought up at the beginning of the story by chapter 15, they're starting to resolve. So um, you can, use that. Really think about the context of the whole story that you've read so far, not just this one little bitty piece. Okay. Continue to email me, call me if you have any other questions, and good luck. Have a good day. Be good humans.